All right. Vocoda.ai, we are a voice studio focusing on AI, meaning crafting voices that are completely digital and can be crafted from text or from other voices or any kind of input. And today we will be talking about shaping those voices to fit your brand and deploy them across multiple channels. Now, before we dive in, I'd like to embed a thought in your head, basically, and it's about this. So we spend a ton of time crafting our brand, designing it, making sure it looks good, the logo is fitting, the colors are chosen, the design guidelines are there, what your tone of voice is in terms of communication, your marketing, everything is there. But if we would imagine a world where we don't have screens and we don't have keyboards to interact with your brand, what does your brand really sound like? And this is something we'll come back to, but this is basically what we are busy with at Vocoda.ai, crafting voices that are molded to your brand, that really fit your brand and match what you're trying to, who you're trying to be, or who you're trying to convince or attract for your business. Before we go further, I want to bring you back 3 years ago. Me and my team were in the middle of COVID. Everyone is at home. I was stuck in an empty office, the team on the screen in front of me. And we were discussing sort of the next goals of development that we were going to tackle. And one of those was actually AI voices. Now, it's interesting to know that Vocoda is part of a creative production studio, Ambassadors, and they are responsible for high-end commercials, anything that touches on marketing and is moving images and sound and music. Ambassadors can do. And therefore, we were interested in tackling a scaling issue, scaling meaning to automate voiceovers that are capable of expressing different emotions, like being very moldable to sort of speak naturally and be convincing. And be convincing not only in the terms of I can understand what you're saying, but really fit in a certain tone of voice, something that you would do with a real voiceover. You would sort of, well, first cast them to sort of be the voice that you like, but then really go in and sort of steer the direction of what the sentence or the commercial is. All right. We started without really knowing where to start. And it took us 6 months with a lot of crying and sweat and anger. And we got to something that we were extremely proud of. I'm going to warn you, it's not that great. But at that point, we had only heard grown men talking like babies. So we were super excited that the computer actually produced something that we could understand. I'm going to run it through you. And this is what it was.
Boy, am I glad that the articulation and pronunciation of our Mel spectrogram generator is finally of high quality.
So there's a little bit of nerd humor in there, but obviously this was not what we set out to do. We were jumping on the tables, but realized that, okay, this is such a small step, but hopefully with enough steps coming further, we might be able to achieve our goal. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit to March 2023, and we hit many roadblocks in between. We were at the point to sort of pull the plug straight forward because it was just an extremely complex problem. After the voice, frog voice that you heard just now, we were able to actually produce some really good sounding voices, male, female, younger and older, but the sentence forming was nowhere near natural. And this is something that you might know from when you talk to Alexa or Siri from Apple. You can understand what is being said, but it doesn't sound human. It still sounds like a computer that speaks. And we were after the real human voices. And in March 2023, we had a breakthrough, and we were finally able to produce audio that would fit our needs. This is text-to-speech, meaning the computer is given a text sentence. There's no other instructions than to say, pronounce this piece of text with this voice, and this is what that sounds like. Sorry, I'm going a little bit too fast. This is what Siri sounds like at that time. So March 2023, this is what Siri and what we're used to sounds like.
Hello, this is Siri. You probably know me already.
And like I said, it sounds like a computer. You can clearly understand it. And if this was attached to your chatbot, it would work. But like, what would it add? It's probably nice for accessibility features, but that's sort of it. March 2023, this is what we were able to produce at the time.
I am your digital voice designed to convert written text into natural sounding speech for you to listen to.
So it's interesting that the complete text formatting, meaning the sentence formatting, no instructions were given, but it's fairly natural flowing. And I have a few more examples for you to listen to.
This voice is generated from text. Could you tell the difference?
So the fact that could you tell the difference contains a question mark at the end already instructs the AI to understand that this is something like a question, a sentence that needs to be pronounced in a different way. And it has learned that from all the voices and all the data that we have fed him to actually do these things without extra additional input. Here's another one.
My voice isn't real. It's generated from text, but it's considered to be very natural and expressive.
And another one.
Nope. No, this whole AI stuff is not scary at all.
So text-to-speech is great for areas where you have a ton of written content and it needs to go to audio. You want a voice that you selected, or we can cast voices for you, specific voice actors that we embed into the system. And it's able to produce content extremely fast, high volume for your needs. But at certain points for your entire brand, you might actually have a need to sort of really go in and steer what is said. Meaning, if you wanted to change the pronunciation or the intonation of this sentence, you would have to sort of instruct the AI, and that's going to be very fiddly. So during the text-to-speech developments, we also developed another technique, which is speech-to-speech. And speech-to-speech basically allows you to grab a microphone and then pronounce what you wanted to say, the way that you wanted to say it, and it will convert your sentence, your audio input, into the digital voice. And with these two techniques, we can really offer below the line and above the line content that would be impossible with text-to-speech only. So here's a speech-to-speech example. At the top, the input, that is the original sample that the voice actor spoke. So this is a real human speaking, grabbing the microphone and saying the sentence as he wants it to be pronounced.
When people hear a voice, they automatically and unconsciously assign a personality to it.
Now, the interesting with speech-to-speech is that we can actually move between male and female. So here is the same sentence spoken with the same intonation and the same speed and the same duration. In fact, it is lip-synced to the original in a different voice.
When people hear a voice, they automatically and unconsciously assign a personality to it.
And here's another one.
When people hear a voice, they automatically and unconsciously assign a personality to it.
So what this means is that we can actually mold and create a voice in a particular language, in a particular way of speaking, and with particular characteristics, and apply them on several areas where you might want to use voices. High-end, low-end, automated, anything in between. It also means that now that we have these tools ready here, we can actually let our voices speak in different languages. And this might come in handy when you have systems like chatbots that need to be operating in different languages for brands that are operating in global markets, for example. We recently did a project for Penguin Books. And Penguin Books wanted to revive an old writer, in this case, Ernest Hemingway. And let Ernest Hemingway speak his own work and sort of produce new content with it. Ernest Hemingway has recorded in his time roughly 20 minutes of audio. And the quality of that audio is extremely low. It sounds like coming through a very old radio. And we've been able to grab that original material, enhance it using another AI to make it high quality, and then feed the AI model with it to be able to speak like Hemingway. And as you might see on the screen, his native language is English, but we've also been able to let him speak Chinese. So this is Hemingway in the sentence that he never spoke. It's part of a book series, The Old Man and the Sea, which you might know. It's a fragment of that.
The Old Man and the Sea. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish.
And this is Hemingway speaking a language that he never originally spoke.
他是个独自下一只小帆船，在湾流上捕鱼的老人。到今天为止，老头已经积累下海84天。
So I'm not sure if there's any people here that actually speak Mandarin. I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on the quality of the language here. But Mandarin is a complicated language. It has sounds that spoken in different heights actually change the meaning. So the words will change whether you speak it low or higher. And it actually has 4 grades within that. So getting the accuracy correct is in Mandarin is actually really crucial. All right, moving on. So knowing what is possible now with these voices that are finally capable of sounding really human-like, how does that really work? And I'll make this as simple as possible, but it's interesting to sort of know what comes before it by crafting this voice. So what we do with our voice actors is where Marco is sitting now in one of our recording studios, we'll invite them over, or this can be remote, and we'll ask them to speak roughly 1,000 sentences and speak them in very different intonations, very different emotions, maybe whispering, maybe shouting, to sort of show the AI on what that voice sounds like. And those are those WAV files that you see entering on the right into this robot. And at the same time, we feed it with the text, the corresponding text of that sentence. And the robot, in this case, the AI model, starts to figure out the correlation between the text and the sound. And it does this on its own. And it's been trained on thousands and thousands of hours of voices in high quality recordings to get a base level of understanding of what human speech is. And with that, we can grab a high-end voice actor and fine-tune that model to now speak a particular language or speak like this particular actor, and mold it such that this one AI model starts to grow and is now learned how to speak like me or how to speak like you. That's the process of how we approach this. We have a ton of high-end voice actors in the system now. And often we notice that when we are interacting with brands, we're actually casting new voiceover artists to come and record their voices to match their brand. And these can even be existing brand voices, right? Some brands actually have voices that are already used in commercial work or in other communications to their clients. All right, so I spoke about above the line content, below the line content, and above the line is this high-end commercial work that you might broadcast or put online, or is anything that is sort of getting the first funnel in, let's say. And above the line content can be produced with text to speech, but often we use speech to speech there to really direct and really sort of time the sentences correctly to the video or to whatever is needed. Below the line content is more your content of maybe a webinar or maybe something like an instruction video, and where you're guiding people through certain processes in your company. It might even be internal videos. And the interesting part here is that although they use different techniques, they're actually sounding like the same person. Chatbots is, of course, an easy one, whether they are completely pre-programmed or open like ChatGPT. A voice is now capable of really communicating with your audience. You could also think about websites, and this is more like an accessibility feature, but if you are operating a large website and want to be able to open this up to people with hearing capabilities, for example, or sight capabilities, then actually a capable voiceover artist is interesting here. And again, this can be your brand voice. Your VRU system for your phones, anything like that, whether it's pre-recorded or sort of created on the fly, is possible now with these high-end voices. Tone of voice is something that we often talk about. And interestingly, tone of voice is most often talked about outside the content of voice or outside the content of audio. And what we help our brands with is really find their tone of voice that sort of matches their entire brand identity. And how to go about that is an interesting feat. So I'm going to show you a picture, and it's actually this one. There's two coffee mugs, and in your mind, take a look at these coffee mugs, and I'm going to ask you to pick one. Take the left one or take the right one. And right now we don't have an actual poll, but I'll give you a second. And if you've chosen, I can probably predict which one you took. And more than 80% is actually picking the right mug. And that's sort of an obvious thing because the majority of humanity is right-handed, and this fits in my right hand easily. And it's obvious, but this kind of knowledge, we use it to design our communication visually. It has been used since the 80s. These kind of concepts really boils down to knowing your audience. Like, if I put this mug on display, I would probably be better off shooting a picture with the handle on the right instead of the handle on the left. And again, it feels obvious, but we're going into a world where we're going to think about these things for voices as well. So let's say we're a brand, and what voice will actually fit your brand? So looking at Vocoda, for example, sorry. Oh, there is a poll. Let me see if I can move that out of the way.
65 chose for the right one. Oh, almost 70-30. 70.
Oh, okay. So it's not as obvious as the statistics say, but still, I was right. Let's say. Thanks, Marco. Cool. All right. So looking at, for example, a brand, and I'm taking Vocoda as an example. The choice of grabbing a male or a female voice here, that might be your first choice. Vocoda, looking at the A at the end, if I can switch to it, I think the poll took my mouse. Okay. The A at the end is basically indicating that this is a female word. Even though Vocoda doesn't exist, you can still assume it's a female. And therefore, we have chosen a female voice for our brand. And similarly, you might be making similar decisions. Well, male or female is quite basic, but if you're choosing, or if you're operating maybe an insurance company in healthcare, you might choose female, or in some cases, even choose male, depending on who you're interacting with. So also that is, of course, a possibility. Maybe if you're operating a chatbot for a mechanic warehouse, you're going to go for a male person, and finding that sort of niche and that fit to your audience is actually what we really love to do as well. Of course, male, female is obvious. We can move into young or old, or maybe pick certain accents or avoid certain accents. And again, these can be mixed if you wanted to, of course. So what does your brand sound like in a world without screens and keyboards? It's a little bit of a teaser, but we really believe that we're slowly moving into this world where we're going to interact with our computers and our AI assistants solely through audio, just by speech. We have some really tiny screens that we use now as mobile phones. We have some really thick fingers that we're trying to type on these incredibly tiny screens. As soon as the computer becomes quick enough and intelligent enough and audible enough to just communicate with you, then why would I type something if I can just ask it, or if I can just ask it to go on Google and fetch my question or anything like that? If you're interested in that concept, you're probably also familiar with ChatGPT. And I believe next week, ChatGPT is launching their voice version of the ChatGPT interface. And it actually enables a ton of interesting features where you can use it to learn a language. You can ask it to teach you Italian, and it will speak Italian with you and switch back to your native language if you need to, and really help you sort of, and it can understand your Italian and help you sort of steer in a certain direction. If this is possible tomorrow, it doesn't mean the world sort of shifts over in a week, but it's a clear sort of step where we are going with this. And we believe that voices are basically going to be everywhere, embedded in the way that we communicate with our audience. While where there used to be, basically, when we had a shop, a physical shop, we would be talking to people behind the counter, and that was the only way of communicating. That moved away to digital, and the voice things just became too expensive. It didn't scale as the digital or internet did. Right now, we're coming back, and voices are actually scaling, and we can apply them now everywhere. And just to be this bold, while the world is moving there, you don't want to be stuck being that team that still operates the fax in 2023, right? So again, it's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 5 years, but maybe after 5 years, this is normal. This is the new normal. And your clients, your audience will actually demand from you, will expect you to sort of have a way to be able to communicate directly with them. One film that really depicts this whole scene, this whole world really, really well. If you don't know it, this is Her. It's a film by Spike Jonze from 2013, actually, featuring Joaquin Phoenix. And if you look at the people here in the metro, on the streets, they really look like the people that we are now. with the only difference, like they're not holding any phones in their hands. This is, of course, it's a romantic film. There's nothing real about it, but it is something that I believe we're moving into. If this is the future, then we need to be thinking about what our brand sounds like in this kind of world. That is what I wanted to share with you guys. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to ask them or to answer them. I mean, do you have anything, Marco?
Yes, sorry, we have a question from Danny, sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. How have the ethical implications been considered regarding imitating the voices of those who can't give consent, and regarding heightening the biases for male voice or engineering female voice for healthcare?
Yeah. So the ethical question is something that is ingrained in AI. This is such an enormous revolution that you cannot go around it, of course. The way that we construct the deals with our voice actors, and these are real people that are sort of driving the voices that are in our system, is really in collaboration. So if you as a brand would decide you want to go for a voice called Nathan, for example, we would basically connect the two of you, and we will sit down and say, okay, what is it that you want to use this voice for? Is it for your chatbot? Is this for your website? Is this for above the line, below the line, anything like that? And construct a collaboration like that. It's also a system that is not necessarily open for anyone to use. We are operating as a AI voice studio, and therefore it's not like I can sign up and pay $20 and use somebody's voice without any control there. So we're trying to be as responsible as possible, and as responsible as possible to the voices that we support, and really try to find a connection between the brands. Your question about bias between male and female in terms of medical support is an interesting one, and it's something that we'll have to sort of explore probably as humanity. So you might be intrigued to pick one over the other, and it's actually not really necessary. You can imagine that on a chatbot, if this is an audio chatbot, if this is a male person answering you, I could ask it to switch to a female person. And if you know something about me already because I'm in your system or I'm a registered client, you could already switch and make that choice for them. So this is fairly new territory, and it's really interesting to see what people will prefer and how it sort of rolls out. Hoping that will answer your question.
We have another one. How long does it take, more or less, to produce a unique digital voice for my brand?
Cool. So we usually take about a week, but to be honest, we can produce it within a day. And why we sort of spend a week is because we really want to make sure that there's no gaps in the knowledge of the voice, meaning it's capable of, well, first of all, pronouncing your brand's name correctly, but there might be a ton of a very specific domain-specific words that the AI might have trouble with. So within a week, we can actually produce a voice and roll it out for you to use within your chatbot. Anything else?
Yeah, hold on. Let me see, we have another one. Is Vocoda running on a proprietary system?
Proprietary, yes, it is. Yeah, we run it in our own cloud, which is a rented data center, but it's not a public cloud, which is important to us. It's also not running on any software that is like accessible to outside or shared between other companies or other people.
Are brands able to have exclusive rights to a voice?
Can be, yeah, and this depends on the connection between the voice and the brand, but it's very much possible. And in fact, this is how brands are currently utilizing regular voiceover actors, so there doesn't really change anything. If you want an exclusivity for 5 years, that is really the construction between the voice actor and your brand, and of course we will help align that.
Let me see. Here's another one. How would your voice perform in another language? Well, we just heard Chinese, for instance.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a really interesting one. We can actually move between entirely native, just vocal characteristics, or leave some of an accent, like the original accent, in there, and sort of move in between there. When you have a voice or a brand that is particularly from a certain area, like your brand really wants to be French, but still wants to be able to talk in different languages, you might want to keep some of that original accent in there. Or we can sort of really push into a native language, which is fluent to that voice as well.
What is your process to identify the right voice for the specific brands?
So this is really something that, with the history of the creative studio and the music and audio teams, the sound design teams there, we've been doing this for 15 years in the traditional way, trying to match and really cast voices to sort of match that brand. And it is, well, an art form is maybe a little bit much, but having knowledge of what kind of voices are out there, and actually knowing that how to reach them and who's there, and actually having seen certain voices work really well with a particular brand, and also having seen the opposite, I think it helps us to sort of advise on that match. And sometimes it's a match that sort of fits in one go, and sometimes it's a very lengthy process, which always depends on expectations from both sides, of course.
Yeah, are you also providing translation for when we recording other languages?
We're not necessarily operating in that area. If you're referring to translating a body of text into another language and then having the AI speak that, but we do work with companies that help us with that. So if that is a request, we can help there as well.
Okay, it's quite a day job to see all these questions coming in, Diederik.
Awesome, yeah. I think there's still time. CDI team will probably kick in when we run out, but happy to answer anything that is there.
What are the main advantages of using digital brand voices over the use of real voice over artists?
Cool. So your above the line content. Let's say this is a one-time commercial. It's a big thing. It will air maybe on the Super Bowl or on TV or whatever. Is there need to be digital? Oh, not at all. In fact, if you have a voice actor that you work with, that is probably the easiest to produce just with the actor himself or herself. But the interesting part is that that actor can actually be also your chatbot and can also be your below the line voice that might have been too expensive to sort of produce with a high-end voice like that. So there is a combination that is interesting, and it might not always make sense to make a digital one if it's for a one-time purpose. But we're really trying to look at this broader landscape of several touch points where your brand might interact with your audience, and where you are now able to sort of really use voices in all those touch points.
And an important part of spoken communication is adjusting our tone and language to adapt to responses and subject matter. Are you thinking about adapting tone and language in AI to support that?
Yes. However, so what we can do is provide some context to the voice when it's producing the response. This context is not audible, is not pronounced, but is interpreted. We are currently experimenting with ways to instruct it, and you can imagine that you could, as you would now with ChatGPT, give it an instruction like pretend to be this or speak like that. We're really keen on exploring that area as well, where you could ask it to sort of slow down and speak a little bit clearer and things like that. Although that is very early stage, and we're currently it's in sort of experiments only.
Okay, I have another one. Were there any bias in the IA itself that you faced in the development process?
A bias is interesting. Like, we are not necessarily constructing an AI like ChatGPT, where we're giving back information. But a bias basically means your data set is not equally distributed. And what we did see at a certain point is that we had trouble getting our female voices as expressive as the male counterpart. And that eventually was caused by an imbalance in our data set with the female voices and the male voices. This imbalance wasn't even that, how do you say, obvious, because the actual amount of voices was equally, like the actual amount of samples was equally distributed, but the male samples were more dynamic, more expressive than the male counterpart. So a bias might exist, although in this context, bias sounds a little bit scary, but it basically comes down to how do you make sure that your model is evenly distributed such that it can handle every sort of occasion.
Are you currently collaborating with companies like Vocoda.ai and Amelia?
No, we are not.
No, we're not. Yes. No is also an answer, Diederik.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about Vocoda. And if there's any more questions, there's always an email address at the bottom of this screen. And you can, of course, reach out to CDI. Thanks to CDI as well for hosting this webinar.
Very welcome. Thank you so much, Diederik, for your interesting talk, and thanks for everyone who attended. We will now stop the recording and send it over to you guys so you can rewatch when it is convenient for you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.